coming up on One Detroit. Former Detroit Congressman John Conyers' legacy, plus Nolan and Stephen on Michigan's role in election 2020. Also coming up, celebrating an environmental victory, the story behind the shutdown of the Detroit Incinerator, and unique design heading to a corner near you. I'm Christy McDonald at the Ivanhoe Cafe on Detroit's East Side. Join us. One Detroit is coming up.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV. The Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund. And by
Business Leaders for Michigan has 5 priorities to make Michigan a top 10 state. Achieve a balanced budget, cut long-term debt, fix our roads, improve all levels of education, further economic growth, plan for a stronger Michigan. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
also brought to you by Ally, NISSAN Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.
I get this all back for everybody.
That's not your motive in any way.
I love walking in here. You know, I've never been here before, but you guys have been here over 100 years.
I know, 110. So the building itself is all original from 1909, with the exception of the kitchen.
What are the biggest sellers here? What do people love to come in here and get?
Well, we've always been known for our perch and our walleye. We make our own potato pancakes, and our pierogies are very good.
You know, a lot of neighborhoods are changing right now in the city. I wonder what you think might happen here, or what would you like to see
It's
happen
already
here?
happening here.
Yeah.
Young people are buying houses and refurbishing them and moving in. It's incredible. It's a total change.
Hi there, and welcome to One Detroit. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us. We are at the Ivanhoe Cafe, also known as the Polish Yacht Club on the city's east side. We have a lot of stories coming up for you this week. People across the city and the country are remembering former Congressman John Conyers, who passed away over the weekend. He had a career that made history and ended in controversy. We will reflect on that. Plus, I catch up with Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson. Election 2020, we're just a year away. We will debate Michigan's role. Also coming up, a big honor for a friend of ours here at One Detroit. You'll see what's in store for Pastor Barry Randolph from the Church of the Messiah. And after years of controversy and pollution, the Detroit Incinerator is shut down. The history behind it and why the fight for environmental justice is far from over. Then we will end with unique design heading to a neighborhood near you. It is all coming up on One Detroit. But we are starting with remembering former Congressman John Conyers and his legacy as a civil rights leader in Congress, serving for 53 years. Let's bring in Nolan Finley, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal. Hey guys, it's good to see you. All right, as we reflect on the news of Congressman Conyers passing away, obviously the end of his career ended much differently than the way it began and what he is being remembered for now, Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, when he started, he was a trailblazer. He went down to Washington as one of the few African-American members. There was no black caucus when he got there. He had to start one. And, you know, throughout his career, his passion was to, or mission, was to make sure African-Americans had a voice in the halls of power and to give them political standing. I think he accomplished that very, very well. I mean, he was the ranking member or chairman of the Judiciary Committee for a long time, very powerful position in Washington, gave George W. Bush hell during his tenure, advocated for universal health care, reparations, a lot of ideas that were way out of the mainstream when he first brought them to the table that are now being embraced as the Democratic Party takes that hard turn left. I mean, they're sounding more and more like John Conyers of 20 years ago. But as you mentioned, his career took a bad turn.
Do you think that we're going to see longevity like that in terms of people serving in Congress from this area anymore?
53 years? I don't know. I think that's probably an era that's passed us by. But as Nolan says, you know, there's always this question about whether people stay too long and whether they can maintain their effectiveness over that time. I think the way to look at Conyers' career is not just as a sitting member of the House of Representatives, but the way that he leveraged that seat to draw attention to other kinds of issues. And so, I mean, there are many different types of people in Congress, and they all use it a little differently. His most important work in the last 20 years, at least, was really about the things that he was out talking about, the things that he was introducing that were out of the mainstream, and trying to move things really slowly toward his direction. And if you think about it, the discussion about reparations that's going on today is absolutely reflective of where John Conyers was for many, many decades before. The healthcare debate that we're having today, as Nolan points out, was heavily influenced by his thinking as well. That's not stuff that he did as a voting, you know, through votes or introducing bills so much as staying on the subject, using that seat as leverage for those things that he cared about, and influencing people in ways that they may not even have been aware.
Is that what, if you are someone who is in politics and looking to kind of grow through leadership, if you're new in Congress or even aspiring to that kind of office, is that something that you take from him? Do you look back at John Conyers' career and say, those are the things that I want to take?
First half again.
Yeah.
But I would agree with Steve. He did stay too long, and too many in Congress stay too long. They can't let go. And you know, John Conyers, as happens to folks who stay there in Washington too long, he became part of the system, if you will. He became part of the swamp. He felt, you know, he began to feel like he was entitled to something more. You know, he was a subject of 2, 3 ethics investigations, and then in the end, caught up in a very ugly Me Too scandal involving sexual harassment with members of his staff. I think when you go to Congress, the lesson here is set your expectations. I'm going to be here 10 years or 15 or 20. 40, 50 years might be a little too long.
Yeah,
So you're saying term limit yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I would not call John Conyers a member of the swamp. I would not say that he's somebody who was a part of the things we need to quote unquote fix in Washington. This was a guy
But
who
he
was
became
really
self-serving.
Well, but this is a guy who was very dedicated to the end to the causes that he started out with. And if you think about,
No question about
if
that.
you think about
The power
so
corrupts.
the bill that he introduced every year to have the United States at least sit down and think about the idea of reparations, and he did that up until the very last year of his career. That is an indication of the kind of influence that he had. No one was talking about this issue 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 20. It was his persistence in that issue.
There's no doubt about that.
And
You
I agree
don't
that,
erase his accomplishments,
Yeah.
but
I agree, he
as,
probably stayed too long. I
as
didn't think he
happens,
was part
you
of the
stay
problem.
too long, you get the feeling that maybe the rules don't apply to you, or you can get away with some things that you might not have done
Power
your
corrupts.
first 20 years. And you know, I think we've seen that over and over again.
Well, let's talk a little bit about power and elections and who's coming up. We are about a year away now from election 2020, and we saw Bernie Sanders was in town last weekend. Rashida Tlaib endorsed him. Give us a big picture sense of where Michigan stands in this next year and the importance of the voters in our state.
Well, we're not that far away from Michigan's impact. I think we vote early March.
In the primary,
We're
yeah.
3-4 months away, just a couple of months away from the January primaries, the early primaries in Iowa and New Hampshire. I mean, this thing's right on us. And you still have a lot of discussion, I think, about who else might get in. And this is so typical in every Democratic campaign I've ever covered, whether it's state level or the federal level. You know, they get down to near the end and they start looking at their candidates. I mean, it happened in the Michigan governor's race last time. So I think this field is set. I don't expect anybody else to get in. And if I'm looking at it, I think in Michigan, just as in 2016, Bernie Sanders will have the edge here.
a different direction.
She's saying she's going to split that vote.
Well,
that
I don't know
side
that
of the
she's.
vote.
I think the polls suggest she's not splitting it. She's taking it. She's doing better than he is in a lot of polls right now, and she's the one who seems to have momentum. I think in some ways the question is which of them will represent that wing of the party and that kind of thinking in the late primaries, right? And that'll depend on how they do in places like New Hampshire and Iowa, but also here in Michigan.
Well, there's no question if one or the other would get out, the remaining person would probably win the nomination as long as the field remains fairly chunky, if you will. But I don't see either one of them. I mean, Bernie proved last time around he'll hang on to the very last gasp, and Elizabeth Warren's not getting out.
He will. So explain to people, though, why Michigan factors so importantly in the large picture of looking at the U.S.
Well, I mean, it's as it always was. There's a good chunk of delegates out of Michigan and electoral votes for the general election. It's a representative state. It probably looks more like the nation than a lot of other states do, and it is still, as it proved in 2016, can go any way. So either way, so it's not necessarily predictable.
I think it's not so much Michigan as it is Southeast Michigan that's sort of indicative of the national push and pull. You had these overvotes in Macomb County for Donald Trump last time. If he can maintain that this time, that'll give him
Do you think
a
he can?
push. I don't see any reason that those voters will vote for someone else. They may stay home because I think they've been somewhat disappointed by him. The opposite end of that question is, what's the turnout look like in Detroit? You had 20,000 Detroiters who showed up in 2012, not repeat in 2016. If they had, Hillary Clinton likely wins the state.
So who can bring out Detroit voters?
Well, that's the question in the Democratic primaries, I think, is which of those candidates gets Detroiters excited the way that Barack Obama
All right, so
did.
take a guess.
Well, I mean, I think Warren is probably one of the ways to do that. But Biden, of course, is more connected with black voters in the polls than the other candidates are, and that's because I think he's connected with Barack Obama, who got black voters more excited than they ever
All
had.
right, last word on this, Nolan.
I think black voters go to Biden, older voters go to Biden. But I still think Bernie wins.
But in the general, I think the question is in the general, if Warren is the candidate, can she pull out black voters?
I don't think so.
In November, I don't know.
I don't think so.
We've got a couple months to at least hash that out. All right, we'll see. All right, you guys, stay right here. We're going to turn now to the end of an era for the Detroit Incinerator and the neighborhood celebration this weekend. This past spring, the incinerator finally shut down after decades of protest against the pollution and the smell. Here's a look at the history and why the crusade for environmental justice is far from over.
I started to hear all of these strange rumors about something big coming up, but I didn't know.
Environmental lawyer Nick Leonard had been working for years, joining a many decades-long fight against the Detroit Incinerator. He was working on an incinerator emissions violations lawsuit in March of 2019 when he heard the news.
And so, like everybody else, I found out with the press release from the company. And then just like that, it was done. And it was an unbelievable moment, an unbelievable feeling.
7 months after the shutdown, and the environmental groups are officially celebrating. An old building on Detroit's Near East Side, converted into a community center, serves as a temporary gallery of protest against the incinerator, now history, just a quarter-mile away.
It's hard for environmental justice folks to stop their work and celebrate because it's like the work never ends.
While passing out flyers for the event, KT Andreski learned some of her neighbors didn't know the incinerator closed, but they did notice they weren't smelling garbage anymore.
We're excited about the celebration that we're having on today, that we celebrate the closing of the incinerator. Yeah. And I know that a lot of you have been a part of that battle, and a lot of you have been a part of that war. And sometimes it seems like it's an unwinnable battle, but it turns around, we have God, truth, hard work, and justice on our sides.
We've been breathing this stuff from the incinerator my whole life. I'm 42 years old. I breathed it my whole life. We smelt it our whole life.
So may as well start off with one of our anthems, right? Ooh, we shall not
In 1988, Detroit filmmaker Joel Silvers documented one of the many incinerator protests. Back then, the concept of environmental justice was just getting started.
So people are like, it's been there for decades. You know, it's gonna be there for decades more. It's not like people have been trying to shut this thing down for 30 years. What makes you think that we're gonna do it? But, you know, the more that we looked at it with, you know, just looking at how the facility functions, how it operates, and just all of the problems that it was having complying with air emissions limits, we couldn't figure out how they were allowed to operate.
I would go so far as to say that's the real reason that the incinerator closed. It was a failed business model.
And what we found out was it was dirtier than the coal-fired power plants that were being retired in terms of every pollutant, in terms of sulfur dioxide, greenhouse gases, mercury, all of these pollutants. And so, you know, did we know all of these things when we built it? Probably not.
It was a simple solution, but it was also a very expensive solution. And we've lived through that experience.
From can to curbside. That's about all the thought most of us give to garbage.
When the city opened the incinerator in 1986, there were worries we were running out of landfill space. Serving Metro Detroit, even Canada, it turned out Detroiters were paying more for waste disposal than the suburbs in their own facility. It remains part of then-Mayor Coleman Young's legacy.
He was convinced that it was somehow going to add to cleansing. It was just the reverse. It became the largest incinerator in the country, and it added to the asthma attacks. It added to the toxicity, and it added to the contamination of the air, the water, and the soil.
They burdened the city with a debt which was 20 years long, and counting the interest, it was $1.2 billion. That's a huge amount of money. And according to some analysis, it was a huge factor into the city becoming bankrupt.
The city of Detroit sold the incinerator to a private operator in 1991, and it's had other owners before Detroit Renewable Energy took over last year.
In this case, the impact was everything went there. Then there were no options to think about saving anything from the waste stream because you had to feed the fire. So it precluded thinking anything else.
I think that this incinerator shutdown basically speaks to the type of city Detroit wants to be. We want to be a sustainable city, or we want to continue with the old, dirty, industrial way that the city's always been.
With Detroit's garbage now going to landfills, these activists are directing efforts toward waste reduction and recycling. More issues to deal with now the incinerator is off the list.
The fight continues to go. The fight is never over until we have total clean air.
That's what I think makes it this really unique environmental story, because it was this group that was built on the shoulders of previous groups and community residents, and just continued the drumbeat throughout the history of the facility, and eventually got to the point where they won. That's a remarkable story.
And we have a statement from Detroit Renewable Energy, the company that ran the incinerator. Quote, serving our community and being a good neighbor is our #1 priority. The difficult decision to close the waste-to-energy plant earlier this year was driven by financial and community concerns. We are working with the city and the local community to determine the best future use for the property where the facility was located. All right, we want to take a moment now to congratulate someone we know very well here at One Detroit. Pastor Barry Randolph from the Church of the Messiah in Island View was just named one of 11 Michiganians of the Year by the Detroit News. It's for his relentless work helping the people in his church and his neighborhood with housing, jobs, and giving them a voice in their changing community.
Church of the Messiah is an amazing church. If you have not visited here, you're crazy. All I can say is the church does, right, exactly. It's almost like it's this major discovery that just needs to take place. So we are definitely a community church. We believe in looking out mostly for the least of these, but everybody is welcome. Here we make the impossible happen. We do everything from affordable housing, and we do employment, and we do entrepreneurship, and we believe that it starts with us. We don't look for the government to save us. We're not looking for big business or law enforcement. No, it's starting with the people of God. I always say Jesus took 12 men with deficit disorder and change the world. So if he can take them, and if he can take one denied him, doubted him, and betrayed him, but they all became great. So God can work with anybody. So.
Big congratulations to Pastor Barry and all the great work that he does. Nolan, you were part of the process in picking of the Michiganians of the Year, which, of course, Steve doesn't want to say Michiganian, but...
Excuse me, I got distracted. They just brought a big plate of kibasi by, and I'm smelling that. Yeah, I mean, he was it was an honor for us to honor him because of what he's done over there. I mean, he is running one of the more unique churches because it's as much a business incubator.
It's an economic driver, really.
Church. I mean, you go over there, and I've been over there several times. Candles making here and tea over here, a video production company, a doctor seeing patients in the back.
Yeah.
You know, it's everything to, I mean, and his philosophy is you're going to end violence, you're going to make the neighborhood better, you got to attack the root causes of poverty. And he's trying to get people the skills they need to rise up and rise out of poverty.
Yeah, and especially with
all
the changes that are coming to Island View too, and making sure that he's out in front saying, hey, we need to be a part of whatever is going to be happening.
Yeah. I mean, and he's doing amazing things, and as Nolan points out, it's all over the map, the kind of things they're doing. I think he would be the first one to say, this is not the role that the church should have to play, that there are lots of other agencies and government and business that should be stepping up.
Yeah, but he doesn't say that at all. What he says is if every church in the city did what he was doing, the problems in Detroit would take care of themselves.
It's a model it's a model for neighborhood improvement. The question is whether a single church and a single pastor ought to be responsible for that many different things that are not about what churches are
It's a perfect model because it's bottom up. You don't have outside agencies and bureaucrats and others coming in and saying, this is what your neighborhood needs. They're deciding what their neighborhood needs, and they're going and doing it. He's attracted $48 million in investment.
No question.
No government agency is going to do that.
All right, that is going to do it for us. Thanks, guys. It's going to do it for One Detroit. Thanks to the Ivanhoe Cafe for having us here. We're going to get you some lunch soon, Nolan. We're going to leave you with a look at the winning installations from the Design Corps Detroit's first ever design competition. These displays will be headed to 3 Detroit neighborhoods this spring. We'll see you next week.
Design Corps is an economic development organization that's part of College for Creative Studies. We've been around for 10 years, and our goal is really about championing Detroit design. We launched the call for applications for the Detroit City of Design competition back in February this year and invited designers from Detroit and from the UNESCO Creative Cities Network to imagine concepts for prototypes of furniture that address safety and mobility. We worked with 3 different Detroit neighborhoods in Rosedale, Grandmont, the Focus Hope area, and Southwest Detroit to develop the brief, and then invited designers to put forth concepts in response. We had a jury that then selected a handful of concepts and then had some back and forth with the designers before we landed on 3 final concepts, 1 for each neighborhood.
So this installation that we're in front of right now is called the Cycle Rate, and it was meant to give people something to do while they were perhaps waiting for a bus or to encourage healthy living. And so that really encourages individuals to interact with it, and when they do, it starts to light up because it's using their energy to create this dynamic effect. But it also creates a beacon in the community. 3 Rooms is an installation that is based off of the 3 rooms of the house. And it's an installation that wants to encourage people to sit and take a moment and pause and reflect. And it can be shifted in different configurations. And also it has a glow-in-the-dark paint that brings more lighting to the area and reflective surfaces. And then the last installation is Garden Novella, which is Garden of Stories, and that is produced by Other Work Detroit. And that's where the team interviewed 14 different community members from Southwest Detroit and captured their stories. And so the element in the Garden Novella is that the stories, you will be able to hear them, and also there is a lighting component with sensors that you'll be able to activate once moving through the Garden Novella.
Support local journalism with One Detroit. Go to dptv.org/OneDetroit and click Donate. Receive a limited edition One Detroit mug as a thank you gift. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV. The Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and by
Business Leaders for Michigan has 5 priorities to make Michigan a top 10 state. Achieve a balanced budget, cut long-term debt, fix our roads, improve all levels of education, further economic growth, plan for a stronger Michigan. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
Also brought to you by Ally, NISSAN Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.